All right, welcome in to Big Hitters Only. We have a very special guest. We have David Cobb of CBS Sports joining us. We're coming off the last podcast was our most listened to podcast, the post game UNC versus Kansas with Spencer, Connor, and Mike. We now bring on David midweek, recording Tuesday, November 12th at 11:28 a.m. right off our daily news call. So I kind of work with David. Did I get your title right and everything?
Yeah, college sports writer for CBS, man. Happy to be on the Big Hitters Only podcast. I was more of a defensive specialist on the baseball diamond in my day, but appreciate you making an exception for me here.
There you go. It's more of a mentality than the baseball thing. I'm definitely not a baseball guy. All right, so David covers college football for CBS, but I wanted to have him on to talk, kind of preview the college basketball season. Now, I first heard of you through the CBS Basketball podcast with who are the two guys that host that? Norlander and Parrish. Because you would kind of pitch hit there occasionally. You and Strongjaw, right? No, who's the other guy?
Yeah, Strongjaw. Kyle Boone. I do not have a nickname associated with any physical features, but I do occasionally appear with Matt and Gary as they are traveling and as the season really picks up. So that's a lot of fun. I enjoy being on there with those guys, and I love talking college hoops. I do both sports, but the college basketball side to me is. I don't want to say my favorite part of the job because I like my guys over there on the CFB side as well, but I like what I get to do on the college basketball side. I get some really nice assignments over there, work with a great team, and have a lot of flexibility with what we get to write. So it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. So that's the Eye on College Basketball podcast. You can check that out and catch all of David's stuff on CBS. All right, let's get into it. Kind of gave you a little bit of an itinerary of what we're going to talk about. I want to, since you're on the national side of things, talk about the national kind of storylines that we're following early in the season, get into a little ACC stuff, some Duke stuff, some of the freshmen, and then close with your kind of take on UNC. Obviously, a lot of our listeners are majority all UNC basketball. So what storylines have you all been tracking early on? Like, what does the average fan kind of need to know about? Because I think we're kind of easing into college basketball, ramp up a little bit after Thanksgiving. But what are you following? What are the most exciting, coolest storylines right now for this season?
Well, first off, news flash that John Calipari is no longer the coach at Kentucky, in case anybody out there forgot that. He is now roaming the sideline at Arkansas. So that's been fascinating to see those dynamics play out early on this season. Kentucky now led in a totally different direction by Mark Pope. Not a whole lot of five-star freshmen on that Kentucky team anymore. That's something I've written about a little bit. And I think in general, there's a resurgence of freshman talent and freshman stars this season in college basketball. I mean, you guys obviously have Ian Jackson and Drake Powell, who y'all are expecting big things from. But really, you go up and down the list, teams throughout the country in the top 50, a large majority of them have a freshman contributing in a major way. And I think this freshman class is head and shoulders above the last couple of freshman classes. And then the other thing, too, right now is that this is no longer a big man dominated sport. If you go back and look at our CBS Sports top 101 players going into last season, it was the top four guys were bigs, including Armando Bacot, who was one of them. Zach Edey was number one. Now you go and look at it, and our top several players are no longer bigs. You got Cooper Flagg on there. You got R.J. Davis on there, Mark Sears. And, you of course, still have Ryan Kalkbrenner and Hunter Dickinson out there in the sport right now. But it just feels like there's a fresh infusion of non-big talent, and a lot of that's coming from the freshman ranks. So I think it's refreshing. I think college basketball kind of needs a little bit of that fresh juice and that fresh energy, especially when we still have some of these COVID guys in the sport who have been around for so long.
Yeah, that's a big thing we've kind of done with the recruiting classes and roster building is like you're getting to the end of this will be the last year of the fifth year COVID guys like R.J. Davis, Armando Bacot took advantage of that. Hunter Dickinson, who UNC fans saw on Friday. I'm sure I'm missing some other people as well. But this will be the last iteration of that. But the freshmen are certainly dominating the sport. Cooper Flagg, Con Knipple. Rutgers has two-star freshmen. Trey Johnson at Texas?
Yeah.
That's killing it right now. All right, what are your top teams? Like, what are the teams that we need to know? I mean, we saw Kansas. Like, Kansas looks really, really good. I've seen Duke a bunch. Outside of that, I think Alabama, who UNC fans will see in December, is a really good team as well. What other teams are you eyeing? Like, what do you think the top five teams will be in a month, you know?
Yeah, I think you got to put Auburn in that conversation because there's been so little sample size to sink your teeth into right
Yeah.
now in terms of like quality matchups that you can't overlook what Auburn did going on the road or going through the air, going back home, and then getting back on the plane and going to Houston and taking down the Cougars. I mean, that is incredibly impressive because we know the type of program that Kelvin Sampson runs. We know how hard it is to beat Houston, especially in their city. And Auburn, coming off that tumultuous plane ordeal, finds a way to go over there with a huge game from Tahad Pettiford, a freshman who was scoreless in their season opener, goes off for, I think it was 19 in that win over Houston. That was an eye-opener for me because wouldn't have thought, as great as we think Auburn is going to be, that they would have that in them at this point in the season. So I think you got to put Auburn up there in that category.
And let's stop right there. The plane thing. That was so bizarre. So if you didn't follow this, I read some stuff about it. Auburn left on, was it Friday for a Saturday game?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then a couple, like 30 minutes into the flight, they had to turn around because two players got into a fight and like clothing was ripped. And they had the audio of the pilot kind of breaking down. They had to go back to the Auburn airport and like get off the plane, and they removed the two players who did not make the trip. And I guess they're going to be disciplined in some way, but a bizarre college basketball, college athletic story on a flight, two players on the same team fighting. Like, I've never seen anything like that. And I read Norlander's story about it as well.
Incredible. Yeah. If you haven't heard the audio, they played it on the Ion College Basketball podcast. Matt and Gary did. And it's the pilot. And he's like, oh, yeah, we're going to have to turn this thing around. We've got some rowdy basketball players. And crazy that they could kind of find their way through that, get through that, and go win a big game. So, yeah, look at Auburn there at the top. I mean, I think they got to be your number one team at the moment.
It's also like, why can't they just figure it out and not have to re-land or, to separate them? I don't know. Bizarre. Anyway,
yeah, but also, isn't it a federal crime to commit an act of violence in airspace? Anyway.
Okay, so you have Auburn, and who else?
Yeah, Gonzaga, because of what they did to Baylor. Again, you got to go with what we've seen, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we saw Gonzaga go out there and just completely dominate a team that we expect to be among the best in the Big 12. And it was a real validation of sorts for Gonzaga because they kind of limped into the Sweet 16 last year and kept that Sweet 16 streak going. And you're wondering, in this era, in the NIL era, is Gonzaga going to be able to get those Jalen Suggs and Chet Holmgren type of players? Or are they going to be able to keep that standard in a place where they're competing legitimately for a national title, as we came to expect over the last 5, 6, 7 years? What we saw from the Zags in that game against Baylor suggests to me that yes, that they could get there this season. Now, of course, they were then tested by Arizona State shortly thereafter, so they're not a finished product, but nobody is in November.
Exactly. And then to round that group out, so we talked about Kansas a little bit, Alabama, Gonzaga, Auburn. I think you've included Duke. What have you seen from Duke so far?
Yeah, Con Knippel's been unreal. That's been a revelation. He's outscoring Cooper Flagg. And of course, the deal with Cooper Flagg is that he does more than score. He impacts the game in a variety of ways, and that's been evident. As he's battled through cramps, that's kind of been the story with him coming out of the game in the second half of their first couple of games because he's cramping. Hey, welcome to college basketball. It's intense. But aside from the obvious storylines there with the freshmen, one thing I do like about this Duke team right now is that they're really leaning into the vets who they went out and got from the portal. They went out and got Mason Gillis from Purdue, who's a 6-year guy. They went out and got a Malik Brown from Syracuse, who's a really high-quality defender. And then a Sion James from Tulane, who probably kind of flew under the radar for most people because he's not a name that most college basketball fans would have known. And they're more or less playing 8 guys in their rotation, and all 3 of them are factoring heavily into that rotation. So I like that they're kind of counterbalancing the reliance on the freshmen by really giving those vets some run. Because I think you need that balance in this era. I don't know that you can win a national title if you're relying so heavily on 5 or 6 freshmen in your rotation. So I like the balance that Duke has established here early.
And they haven't been really tested yet. Army last week in Maine. They will get tested tonight. So when you're listening to this on Wednesday morning and Wednesday, we won't know what happened against Kentucky. But more on Duke. Yeah, it looks like they're only playing the three freshmen. As I pull up these stats here, Con Knippel, like what a name, but he is a stud. I mean, he can shoot, he can score, he's physical, he's built. He's what, about 6'6", 6'7", kind of that shooting guard, small forward build. Everybody knows Cooper Flagg. We'll talk about him a lot this year. And they have the two guards that are the veterans coming back, Tyrese Proctor and Caleb Foster. But then you're right, the transfers in that I think like John Shire wanted to bring in some veteran presence, some experience to build around the freshman stars with Malik Brown, Mason Gillis, and Sion James.
You have to. You have to do it. I mean,
and it's
I don't
smart,
think
right?
you can win. Yeah, I don't think you can win big going only freshmen anymore.
And we've seen that with Duke, how they always have the 5-star freshmen. They can't always get over the hump when it kind of comes down to the NCAA tournament. Now, the big man, Kaman Maluk, is that right? Malak?
Yeah, I'm still working on that pronunciation myself. But yeah, I mean, that guy, I think he could be one of the best bigs in the ACC by the time this season is over.
And I think, from a UNC perspective, you see a guy like that. I mean, he's 7'2", he's built, he is a freshman, but kind of seeing what Hunter Dickinson did to UNC, I think those are going to be challenges for the Tar Heels, is going against a big man who is just physically way more imposing. But I like this Duke team. I think, Knippel has been the big surprise, even though he came in with a lot of hype coming off like preseason stuff. And then Flagg will be interesting to see how he develops and whether he becomes more of a scorer or just kind of contributes like he has already on the defensive side and as a rebounder and as a facilitator as well. Are any other teams you want to talk about as I look through the AP Top 25? I mean, UConn, have you got eyes on them yet?
Yeah, a little bit. I've seen enough to know that Leanne McNeely, their freshman, is a player. But hey, look, they're replacing 4 starters, so it's a little bit of a new look. I mean, you got Hassan Diarra kind of running the point now. Curious to see what Aiden Mahaney develops into. He's that St. Mary's transfer, and this is a major step up in competition. So what's he going to be able to bring them? They haven't played anyone of real significance yet, but Dan Hurley's the coach. Alex Caravan is back. Samson Johnson's been in that rotation. Diarra's played a lot of minutes for him. And then they got guys like Solo Ball who are, they're going to step up and be a good player. So I can't wait for Maui. Maui's kind of going to be that, hey, here's where we learn about teams sort of situation. And UConn is certainly high on the list of teams that I'm curious to learn about there.
Yeah, and they could end up playing UNC in the championship game out there. They have a win over Sacred Heart in New Hampshire so far, and play Lemoyne and East Texas A&M before heading out to Maui. The first round game is against Memphis. Is anybody from CBS going out there, writer-wise?
That I'm not sure of. Unfortunately, it won't be me. I'm going on paternity leave soon. Although, even if I wasn't, don't think I'd get sent to Maui. But I don't know. Good question. I don't know if Matt's going or not. But hey, look, if you need somebody to break down Memphis for you, I host a Thursday afternoon radio show in Memphis, and I was born and raised there, so we can talk Tigers if you ever need to at any point.
Do you live in Memphis?
Not currently. I have at times throughout my life.
Okay.
Yeah, so kind of all over the state of Tennessee. Right now we're in Middle Tennessee. But yeah, I'm in and out of Memphis all the time. So it's kind of like home. But I just kind of tell people I'm from Tennessee. It's the easiest way to sum it up.
Yeah. Awesome. Wait, so you host is it daily?
So it's only on Thursday. So there's a permanent Thursday co-host in the afternoons on the ESPN affiliate there in Memphis, and he goes through a rotating cast of co-hosts. So
cool.
So I am his Thursday co-host, and
Love it.
I used to cover the Grizzlies. So we talk Grizzlies, of course. We talk a lot of Tigers, and then Memphis is in the heart of SEC country, so there's never any shortage of SEC football discussion as well. So it's a fun market, and it's a basketball centric market, kind of in the same way of Carolina in a sense, where basketball is king. So it's they're excited about the team they have there. Don't know that I necessarily think that Memphis is going to go out there to Maui and going to challenge the UConns and the UNCs of the world for that title. But, they do have some good talent on that team this year.
Love it. I want to get a little bit more into your career and your path at the end of this podcast. All right. So went through some top teams. We talk about some freshmen. I think you're right. Like we had Travis Branham do a big board for the NBA draft at the beginning of the year. And all 14 players for the lottery were freshmen, including, I think, 3 Duke players, and 2 UNC players. I'm trying to think of the other school that had. Oh, and then the 2 Rutgers freshmen. Baylor has the Edgecombe, VJ Edgecombe guy. What are the? I mean, what freshmen are you like? I want to get your eyes on that maybe our listeners don't know too much about.
You actually mentioned him earlier, but Trey Johnson right now at Texas is at or near the top of the country in scoring, and that is not something you see a whole lot anymore. So I haven't really had a chance at this point to dissect his game or watch Texas in depth, but this is a big year for Rodney Terry because the Texas is moving from the Big 12 to the SEC. And you got to remember the circumstances in which he got that job. He took over midseason for Chris Beard, and he's kept it on the rails, but I do still think the jury is out on whether or not he is the right guy long-term at Texas. And boy, when you hit on a guy like Trey Johnson, in addition to some of the transfers that Texas brought in, I think it gives them a chance to be really competitive in the SEC. And I wasn't necessarily sure that was going to be the case going into the season, but you just do a little bit of box score scouting on what Trey Johnson has brought to the table so far, and he looks like one of the most electric guards in the country. So he's at the top of the list for me of guys who I can't wait to kind of dive into a little deeper.
Yeah, and he was the number 6 guy in our rankings, 24/7 Sports rankings, which we always reference here on the Big Hitters podcast, right behind Cooper Flagg, Ace Bailey at Rutgers, Dylan Harper at Rutgers, Kaman Maluk at Duke, VJ Edgecombe, and the number 6 is Trey Johnson. Do you know, I mean, it's probably more of a recruiting question for some of the guys I work with, but how did Rutgers get, 2 of the top 3 guys? It's such a random thing. I know one guy's from New Jersey, Dylan Harper, but if you just look at these rankings, it's very surprising. You're used to seeing Duke and occasionally get a random school. But do you know anything about the recruitment of those 2 guys?
Well, so Dylan Harper's brother, Ron Harper Jr., was a multi-year key star player for Rutgers under Steve Peichel. So they developed that connection organically because, Ron Harper Jr. was not the 5-star McDonald's All-American type of guy. He was the type of guy that Rutgers would normally land. So in that sense, it's an organic relationship because when your brother goes to that program and has success and your family builds a relationship with the coaching staff, maybe you're going to give that school a longer look than you would have otherwise. But then when it comes to Ace Bailey, I'm looking this up on the fly to confirm that I've got the facts right, but he's got a connection. Yeah. It's Jamichael Davis, who's also on that team, who's going to be a really good player for them this year. They grew up playing together. So I don't know the extent to which Jamichael Davis influenced, Ace Bailey directly going to Rutgers, but I think you look at Dylan Harper committing, and you're like, all right, well, if Rutgers is good enough for him, and I got a buddy playing up there already, I think that those are sort of the elements at work. It's about relationships, right? Even in the NIL era, relationships still matter, and I think that's an easy way to explain why Rutgers ended up with 2 potential lottery picks on their roster.
Love it. And then I need to get some Connor Flagg takes out of you. Do you think it's Cooper Flagg? Sorry, I said Connor Flagg. Cooper Flagg. Do you think it's possible to live up to the hype? Like I see him as the most hyped freshman, even more so than Zion Williamson, but kind of on the same trajectory. Like everybody knew his name 2 or 3 years before he enrolled because of the highlight videos and the fact that he is white. It plays into his hype. The name is kind of a cool name. Is it possible to live up to the hype? I mean, do you think he's slotted for number 1, or do you think because there's a lot of talented guys when you talk about the rankings here again? You talk about Ace Bailey and VJ Edgecombe, a lot of talented guys. They say, or even Trey Johnson could be picked over him. What do you think about how the Cooper dynamics will end up playing out when we start talking about this again? 3-4 months from now.
Yeah, I think he's pretty foolproof. He'd have to collapse. There'd have to be something health related, right? I think for Cooper Flagg to cede that number 1 overall spot. Now, of course, Ace Bailey we haven't even seen yet because he's been banged up for these first couple of games. So, right, like it's early. But when you look at Cooper Flagg, you got a guy who can guard 1 through 4, maybe even 1 through 5, depending on the matchup at the next level. You got a guy who can score at all 3 levels. And then he's a plus athlete, high basketball IQ. I mean, he checks all the boxes. Yeah. And then he rebounds. He can distribute. There's not really a whole lot that's missing from his game. He can shot create, and he's already tested himself against the best players in the world because he was part of that Team USA Select, which scrimmaged over the season with the Olympic team that went on to win the gold medal. So, I mean, you see the highlights coming out over the summer of him going toe-to-toe with the very best players in the world at 17 years old. So the upside piece of it, too. I mean, we're looking at a guy right now who's not even 18 years old and who already checks all these boxes. So I think that's where there's this idea of like, what could he even become even more than this, right? And so it's it's his to lose. And what we've seen through 2 games, there's no evidence to me that suggests he's going to lose it. I think he's your number 1 overall pick in the next draft.
How about Shire calling out the training staff?
Yeah, the
about the hydration.
Thing. It's funny, isn't it? It's like, you remember it's Zion's freshman season, the shoe busted.
Oh yeah, I was there.
Yeah. That was like an iconic moment almost, and now it's like we've got the Cooper Flagg cramping gate. So personally, I drink body armor. I think body armor is the move. So I don't know if they've tried that yet, but unpaid ad there for body armor.
Yeah. Well, they had this hydration issues, I think, with Paolo. They had to get him on some electrolyte mixture too, and so this is like another star freshman, 2 or 3 years removed, and he's having some cramping issues already. It's just funny to call out your training staff. Like, those guys are making like not a lot of money, and they're getting called out by the head coach of Duke basketball. I learned a lot about hydration through my marathon and the different kinds of electrolytes I use, and all the different powders, liquid IV. Among others, that it does make a difference. You kind of crave it too, so I'm interested to see how that all comes out. All right, freshman, there's a bunch of hot names. I think it's Knipple guy is the real deal too. I mean, I could see him going top 5 in the draft with what he's shown and just how physically ready he is. I'm interested to see how Ian Jackson and Drake Powell develop. They haven't shown too much yet. Ian Jackson flashed a little bit in the Kansas game about when he's kind of playing a little looser, his ability to score. I think Drake Powell has all the physical traits. He needs to get more polish offensively. ACC, is it just Duke, UNC? I mean, what other teams should we kind of know about? Because we're such in a bubble here. I'm in Greensboro, North Carolina. In North Carolina, we talk. I don't think State's going to be that great. Wake, I saw them. Wake in Michigan. I went to that game. It was in Greensboro. Are there any other teams? I think Virginia's a little kind of falling off the map now that you're eyeing.
Yeah, for the title, Duke and UNC, I'd be pretty surprised if somebody else emerges into that group and really gives them a run for their money. But I'm really curious about Miami. It's a bounce-back season for Jim Larrañaga and the Canes. Obviously, they made the Final Four in 23, but then really had a drop-off this past season. But I look at their starting lineup, and I'll run through it just real quick. They got Nigel Pack. He's a fifth-year guy who fills it up from the outside. Just a potential all-conference guy. Then they got Jalen Blackman, who I had ranked among my top 100 transfers coming in from Stetson, which was a really solid mid-major program. Lynn Kidd, who's an in-conference transfer at center from Virginia Tech, productive veteran guy. Brandon Johnson and A.J. State-McCray in there, too, who are both veterans as well. And then they're bringing Jaleel Bethea off the bench. He's a top 10 freshman. And then Matthew Cleveland, who was in the league at Florida State and then transferred to Miami last season, and he was a starter for their Hurricanes last season. He's coming off the bench. So I think Larrañaga has like a really deep veteran nucleus there. Injuries, have been an issue for them over the past, particularly last season at Miami and Florida State. But if Miami can stay healthy, they have the talent, I think, to be an offensive wagon and maybe a little bit of a wild card, right? I don't see them, again, competing necessarily with Duke or with North Carolina for the league title. But they're a team that I'm curious about, that I'm keeping an eye on. They hadn't played anybody yet, but they're putting up big numbers, and I really like some of the pieces that they have.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems like Duke is going to run away with it and get challenged by UNC, but just going through it, I mean, I think Clemson coming off the Elite Eight run, they did lose some talent there. I mean, I can't speak to many of the other teams. Virginia's got to be just kind of, they've already scrambling to kind of, they lost a guy to transfer portal already and kind of scrambling with Tony Bennett leaving. Louisville, interesting to track. I think they had that hire. It's going to be interesting to see how he does there. And they got tons of, I think, 13 new players for Louisville or something like that, some crazy number too. So it's just so many teams. I'm just looking at the standings.
The league is too big. It's crazy. Like
know,
these 18 team conferences. What are we doing?
Just-
Louisville kind of they flunked their first test. They had Tennessee in their building over the weekend, and
got killed.
Yeah, they played a clunker there. Wake is interesting. I mean, that win over Michigan is. You can't scoff at that. I mean, you were there. You saw it live. I mean, that's a team that needs to make the NCAA tournament. I mean, they've been on the doorstep under Steve Forbes, and it's like, all right, when are we getting there? And you look at the talent. Like, there's a lot of talent. I mean, Hunter Salas, former highly touted guy. I mean, he was super productive last year. There's some good pieces on that Wake team. So, yeah, I mean, I think they could be in the mix, for one of those top 4 spots, in the final conference standings.
Awesome. All right, let's get into UNC. I want your takes. I mean, I'm pretty well versed in the team here. You watched the Kansas game, I'm assuming?
Yeah.
Give me what you think after watching this team play.
I think Seth Trimble is that dude. I think he's a bad man. I kind of have been on that horse for a while, even going back to last season when there just weren't a ton of minutes available for him. And now he's finally getting that opportunity to shine. And I think that exhibition at Memphis was big because R.J. Davis didn't play in that game. And so I think that Seth Trimble kind of got to show what he could do in that game, and he was on the floor, played heavy minutes, made clutch shots. He was unstoppable. I'm sure UNC people already knew he had that in him. But to go out there and do it against a quality opponent in a road environment, like that was one of those moments where you're like, all right, like this guy is not just like a good bit player. Like he might be like one of your best players. And when you think about UNC being far more perimeter oriented in the post Baycott era, like you can never have any, you can never have too many guys like that who can fill it up from the outside. So really excited about Seth Trimble. A little worried about Cade Tyson. But yeah, I mean, I think you give UNC more credit than demerit for going on the road to Allen Fieldhouse and battling their way back from a huge deficit to be in that game late with a chance to win it on the final possession. I mean, I think, yeah, you want the win, but, that was impressive the way they were able to come back in that game.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, completely, like, just a huge confidence builder. You could have lost that game by 25, 30. Instead, you come back and only lose by 3 with a chance to win. And obviously there's concerns about the front court. I feel like we talk about that so much, but the Cade Tyson thing, it's now 2 games, and including the Memphis game where I think he only had 1 shot or a couple points there. Did you ever see him play at Belmont? Like, I know you're in Tennessee, so.
I did. Yeah. I saw him play last year, and it was a good Belmont team, and he looked good against that level of competition. So you assume it's going to translate, especially with a guy who's, I don't want to say he's just a shooter, but like, typically speaking, that's a skill that translates. And
yeah,
is it going to? I don't know. It's too early to completely write him off, but certainly the early returns are concerning.
Yeah, I mean, people always say shooting translates. Like it's a skill that you can do like at every level, and he has a size too. I'm wondering if it's the speed of the game, if it's the pressure. I mean, he airballed a 15-foot jumper and then gave up a 3 on a screen, and he was taken out. He played 1 minute. He played less than 2 minutes against Kansas. Maybe the stage was too big. It's just concerning because he's you consider him a veteran. He's a junior. He played 2 years college ball, and he shot 46% from 3. He's one of the top transfers in the nation, one of the best shooters in the portal. And you expect him to start and be the 3, and he's not starting. And I wonder at what point Hubert doesn't play him anymore. Like, I get Kansas, but they have American before they head out to Hawaii. They play Hawaii, then they go into the Maui tournament. I wonder at what point do you just give him 15 minutes straight, let him make some mistakes, or I wonder if it's just like I don't know. What do you do as a coach? Like, what do you think you do with sitting here 2 games in with him?
Yeah, so you've got some patsies still on this non-conference schedule, right? Like,
yeah, but it's not the easiest non-con.
Yeah, but okay, like American, LaSalle, Hawaii. These are games where you would hope you could get a guy like that, as you say, 15 minutes a run, just to build some confidence. And I kind of flash back to last year too. And correct me if I'm wrong here, but Cormac Ryan didn't necessarily get off to the best start offensively.
Yeah, he was up and down, and fans got on him. But he'd make some threes. Like he was playing a lot. And he is defensively, he was like kind of a dog.
And that's it. And I feel like that's maybe what's missing here. Like if you're struggling offensively, you got to be doing everything else well. Is K Tyson doing everything else well? Because I think if he is, then you can justify leaving him on the court even against quality opposition and just know that within the flow of the game, eventually the offense will come to him. But if he's not doing everything else well enough, then I think it gets harder to make that decision. And you look at UNC's defense, and right now at KenPom, number 45 in defensive efficiency. Well, a year ago they were a top 10 team in defensive efficiency. Were Baycott and Ingram and Cormac Ryan like that good of defenders, or have things kind of slipped a little bit here? And if so, maybe what's the reason for that? And if you're Hubert Davis, you got to be real intentional about looking at the lineups that give you the best chance to win on the defensive side of the ball. And it may be that K Tyson isn't checking that box.
Yeah, and because those minutes could go to Drake Powell, who's like an exciting freshman who brings a lot on defense and has that size to play the 3 and even some stretch 4. And then Jalen Withers, I thought has been pretty impressive. People love to give Jalen Withers a tough time, but I mean, he was a key part of that comeback. He hit back-to-back threes. I think Jalen Withers is one of the more athletic players on UNC's roster from a rebounding standpoint, defensive standpoint, and can guard the 4 and the 5 at times, undersized 4 or 5 for UNC. So it'd be interesting, man. I just think K Tyson's got to come in, he's got to be ready to shoot and got to be ready to knock down some shots. Because if he can make 2 or 3 threes, it completely changes the game, and he can be a contributor there. So that's early concerns from the UNC front here. All right, I think we touched on what we can touch on early in the season. I want to get into your career a little bit. It's always interesting to see how people get into this business. Some younger listeners wanting to get into writing and the content biz. You went to Tennessee, graduated in 2015, correct?
That's right.
And then you got a Master's of Science in Sports Analytics. Tell me about that from Ole Miss.
Yeah, so actually, shout out to Paramount. They have a great benefits program where you can get a certain amount reimbursed on the tuition of a degree that is deemed applicable to your work. And so with what we do in the sports content realm, sport analytics, that's a part of it now, right? Like you got to be able to speak that language and understand some of those deeper statistical trends, or it's certainly helpful if you can. And so, that was something that we looked at and I thought, hey, like this is a skill set that I can add, right? Because I'm not the former college player. I'm not a beat writer anymore either. I'm not at a ton of press conferences. I go to some games, but I'm not at 3 or 4 games a week anymore like I was as an NBA beat writer or as a college beat writer. So like what can I do to help kind of separate myself or add to my toolkit here a little bit? And the analytics thing seemed like a good way to do that. It's such a huge part of basketball in particular. And so I don't fancy myself to be a guru, but it was a good experience. It was to kind of prove to myself that like, hey, I could go back to school. I could get a master's. I could,
this was 2 years ago, right? You did 1 year. I'm assuming it was remote.
Yeah, it was fully remote, 100% online. Never set foot on campus. It's crazy. But it's a 1 year program, but you can stretch it out into 2, and that's what I did because I was still working full time and stuff. So yeah, it really wasn't that bad. Yeah, I don't know that I'm the next Ken Pom or Evan Mia or what have you, but or Bart Torvik. But it was. I'm glad I did it. It was a good thing to do.
And then, so that was more recently. But then you, while in college, did some stuff for the Daily Times. Is that in Knoxville, Maryville, Tennessee? So just some intern stuff.
You're deep in the LinkedIn.
Oh, dude, I'm on your LinkedIn. I'm absorbing it. So then, and then a news intern at Chattanooga Times Free Press, and then the student paper at the Daily Beacon.
Yeah. Cut my teeth at the Daily Beacon. I got my start as the volleyball beat writer, which was awesome because as a freshman there, you're forced when you're covering basketball at a place like UNC or Tennessee, or you're covering football at one of these major power conference schools. You get into a press conference after one of those games. There's 45 other reporters in there. You don't even have to ask a question. Right? But when you're covering volleyball, it might be you and one other reporter, if that. It might be just you. So it's up to you to like actually have paid attention to the game that you were watching, and then have thoughtful, insightful questions to ask the coach and ask the players after the game, and then be able to craft a story around that, not after having read what 30 other reporters have written about the game, right? Because if you're covering volleyball, there weren't 30 articles written about it. There may be a press release from the sports information department. And so, yeah, that was a great start for me because it forced me to really start to think originally. It forced me to get comfortable in front of coaches, in front of players at a young age, and helped me develop some confidence that I could do this. And I wasn't just going to be piggybacking off the pros who were in the room. And then from there, of course, it led to opportunities to cover basketball and cover football. And the highlight for me was covering Pat Summitt's final SEC championship in Nashville. So, yeah, my freshman year was the year she had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And, she was still coaching. She had a lot of help that season from Holly Warlick, who eventually was her successor. But that's one of those things I'll never forget. As a freshman, getting to cover a Legends, final championship like that, it was, one of those things that is still very surreal to this day.
And then reading that post here, you broke some news on sexual assault. Tracked allegations of sexual assault against athletes as an assistant news editor. Criticized athletic administrators as a senior sports columnist, and gave my okay, yeah, that's just some other stuff. Yeah, were you not very popular? Or if you're trying to track down football players or trying to win for the Vols, what happened there?
Oh man, you might be getting more than you bargained for here, but I'll keep it concise,
okay,
if possible. So I don't know, you've probably seen the Todd Golden stuff, right, at Florida right now. So he's obviously in some turmoil there. Allegations being that he's stalked or sort of preyed upon some women on that campus, and it's being investigated by their Title IX office. And that story was broken by the student newspaper down at Florida, which is it's an incredibly difficult situation to be in. And I have so much respect for the fact that those writers down at the Independent Alligator were able to get that scoop because there's so many people in powerful positions who don't want something like that to come out. And when you're a student, you don't have an attorney at your beck and call. You don't have an editor 3 seats over from you who's a 30-year veteran of these scenarios and situations. And so you have to navigate these very difficult, very real, and very seismic situations. And so I was in that situation too, a little over a decade ago. We had heard that there were allegations of sexual assault against a basketball player. And I started to pursue getting those records and getting those police reports and getting information on that. In the process, I stumbled upon information about sexual assault allegations against a football player that I didn't know existed, that nobody had reported on, right? Mm-hmm. So, here I am as a college sophomore navigating a very thorny, very difficult journalistic situation. And, ultimately, what happened is part of the way the university responded to our inquiries and to our requests for information on this ended up getting folded into a massive Title IX lawsuit that the university had to settle. And it was just an incredible journalistic learning experience for me, navigating just tricky situations, man. Tricky situations. So, just shout out to all the student newspaper folks out there. Like it's a grind. It's tough. It's thankless. You're getting paid very little or maybe even nothing at all. But man, those are some of the most formational and impactful experiences that kind of help lay the foundation, for my career. So, when I saw that story from the Alligator on Todd Golden, about a week ago, it was like, wow, like it kind of took me back a little bit. And you bringing that up, it's that's why the student newspapers are important. It's why they need to be supported because nowhere else can you really get that real world experience quite like that.
Yeah, that's great. It's true capital J stuff there, and getting all the different reports and stuff, and diving deep into a very sensitive subject. All right, so from there, graduated. Obviously, it seems like you did some work for the Knoxville News Sentinel, freelance reporter, intern type stuff. It seems like you took like the classic path, like trying to break in any way you can. Right, you're 23, you'll take any job, any chance to cover team and make a little money. Then you went to work for the MLB for a summer. It looked like. Is that internship they do?
It was, yeah. That was like our goal. Yeah. But yeah, you're right. I totally took the classic path. Like nowadays, there's a million different ways into it, and there is no one size fits all sort of approach. But I definitely took like the '90s approach to to grinding my way up.
Yeah, I know a lot of the DTH guys that younger, obviously a lot younger than me, but a lot of those people do that MLB internship. It seems staff writer at the Chattanooga Times Free Press. I don't know why I can't read today. So that was kind of like, I guess, your first real job, which, I'm assuming y'all were still printing then. I'm sure they're still printing now, but, and then Memphis Grizzlies beat writer. So why did you leave? Was that just a step up from Chattanooga Times Free Press covering SEC, it looks like Tennessee beat writer, which is a great role there. And then you got to work for the Memphis paper, the commercial appeal as a Memphis Grizzlies beat. Well, talk us through that kind of decision to move. Is it from a smaller town paper to Memphis to cover NBA teams? Is that kind of the move there?
It was a tough decision, So I'd been at the Chattanooga Times-Free Press. They had given me a great internship opportunity in college. They believed in me and brought me on to the news desk as the outdoors writer for my first job. And then when the guy who was covering Tennessee athletics for the Times-Free Press, Patrick Brown, ended up getting on at 24/7.
Yeah,
and he's still there now at Go Vols 24/7. And so it created an opening there for me to go up and cover the Vols, which I'd done in college. So that was a natural transition. And so I was in that role for almost 2 years, covered the crazy failed Greg Schiano hire that turned into a fiasco.
Clay Travis trying to rally the troops to not get him on.
Yeah,
right?
No, that was nuts. That was insane. I have a T-shirt that says "I survived the 2017 Tennessee coaching search."
That's funny.
And then at one point, that search actually turned to Dave Doran at NC State. And then the Tennessee fans were like, "We don't want him," and it's like, okay, so who do you want? Jeremy Pruitt? How'd that work out? Anyway, thankfully I did get to cover a little bit of Rick Barnes' basketball tenure. That was fun. Although I had the Sister Jean game. I was there in Dallas when Loyola beat Tennessee, and Loyola kind of started making their run. So that was an interesting little caveat. But no, so what happened is I told my wife, because I'm from Memphis, she's from Knoxville. She'd ask me, of course, like, would you ever want to move back to Memphis? And I said, probably only if the Grizzlies beat job came open, because I grew up watching the Grizzlies. I grew up reading the commercial appeal. And, there was a legendary beat writer there in that position covering the Grizzlies at the paper for, the entirety of their existence from when they moved from Vancouver. And so, I didn't necessarily even expect that would ever even be a realistic possibility. But the Grizzlies beat job happened to come open at a time when my dad was going through ALS back in Memphis, which is obviously, it's a terminal disease. It's one of the worst. I mean, it's terrible, right? And so, we didn't want to move just for something temporary, right? Because he even told me, and he's been gone several years now, but when I was considering making that move, he's like, David, don't make this move, just because of what I'm going through, because this isn't going to last forever. But it was a chance to kind of, I thought, move up in the world. Came at a time when my wife was kind of looking to make a career transition as well. So we made that jump, and we ended up, in Memphis. And it's crazy how things work out, isn't it? Because by virtue of being in Memphis, I became a semi-regular guest on Gary Parrish's radio show in Memphis that he had there for a long time. Well, after a while, a job opening crosses through my inbox for a college sports writer opening at CBS. And it was attracted to me because it was a remote thing, and it was, my wife was looking into some things that might have us moving around a little bit. And so I hit up Gary, and I was like, hey, like, what do you think the chances are that, that I could get in the running for this gig at CBS? And he said, well, I'll let him know that you're interested. And, without that, I never would have ended up at CBS, and I've been here for 5 years now. And so it's crazy. Like, I don't know where you're at on this, but like, I'm a believer. I'm a person of faith. Right. And the reason for that, or one of the reasons for that, is I just feel like I can look back and see all these parts in my journey where like God has directed my steps. And that's one of them, man. It's because like, the horrible circumstances sort of that brought us to Memphis then led to something, that I couldn't even have imagined when I was back on the Tennessee side. Anyway, I just think it's cool. That's kind of how, how it all works together when you're able to look back 10 years into your career and see the way each step has led to the next. And so anyway, I've been at CBS for 5 years now, and we've kind of lived all over the country. I mean, literally all over the country over the last 3 or 4 years. So
where have y'all been?
We were in Tucson, Arizona, Hattiesburg, Mississippi, Gainesville, Florida, Moline, Illinois, Cranberry, New Jersey, Orange County, California,
Whoa.
Orange County, Florida. Yeah.
Why so much moving?
So my wife had been in TV news when we lived in Knoxville.
Gotcha.
And then when we moved to Memphis, she got kind of pivoted out of TV. and she got into working for Chick-fil-A, and she took a position with their corporate office to where she moves like the program that she was in. They have you go and open their new restaurants or run some of their restaurants that are in transition. So you basically just go in for 2 or 3 months, maybe 6 or 7 months for one of the longer assignments. And but it was great because my job at CBS was remote. And it dropped me off at the doorstep of some really cool stories. Like we happened to be in New Jersey right when Fairleigh Dickinson was doing its thing, right before they went and beat Purdue. I had a conversation with Tobin Anderson in the FDU coach's office 2.5 months before they beat Purdue, where I asked him, like, hey, y'all are the smallest team in America. What would you do if you ended up playing Purdue? And then lo and behold, that came to fruition. So like it was cool, the traveling part of it, because it gave me a chance to get out and meet some coaches and see some schools that I never would have seen otherwise.
Man, that's so much moving. Where are you now?
We're a little town called Springfield, Tennessee, just a little bit north of Nashville.
All right, final question. NBA, covering the Grizzlies, how often did you go with the team to away games? I know back in the day with baseball and NBA, and obviously with NFL, it's a little different. But, I mean, you would hop on the team charter and go. I know it's a lot different now, but did you go to a lot of away games as the beat writer for the Grizzlies?
Yeah, quite a few, especially the first year. They started out like in contention. It was Mike Conley and Marc Gasol's final season before they ultimately got traded. So they were kind of clinging to the last vestiges of that era, and they started out really hot. And so, like in particular, there was one 4-game West Coast road trip. Portland, Sacramento, Golden State. Denver I think was maybe on there. So that was crazy. You're gone for like 11 days. You're taking 5 or 6 different flights. And it's not like the old days where you did travel with the team. I mean, you're booking your own commercial flights. Hotel points racked up, man. Like we are like Diamond Ambassador Elite on like Hilton and Marriott, from all the traveling we've done over the last 5 years. But yeah, the highlight of the Grizzlies tenure for me was I got to cover a good chunk of Ja Morant's rookie season before I made the jump over to CBS. And that was, as you can imagine, exciting and pretty electric to see him kind of rise from Murray State and small town South Carolina to become this megastar.
That's awesome. Well, that was a good recap. It shows kind of the path. There's always different paths to get. I mean, I didn't start until I was like 28, 29, so really late into my 20s when I got into the business with 24/7 Sports. But your path is more traditional, but now you're doing some radio and some podcasting, which is a cool way to flex kind of a different talent there. David, appreciate it. We'll maybe have you back on midway through the season for more of a recap. Thanks for your time, and enjoy the games tonight.
Yeah, man. I appreciate it.
All right, thanks for listening to the Big Hitters Only podcast. Remember to like, follow, subscribe on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.